Okay, so we're going to discuss tonight Chapter 8, Performance Appraisals with respect to human resources. We're going to start with what we're going to accomplish tonight, the goals. So the learning objectives for tonight is to identify the major parts of an effective performance management process, discuss the three general purposes of performance management, identify the 5 criteria for effective performance management systems, discuss the 5 approaches to performance management, the specific techniques used in each approach, and the way these approaches compare with criteria for effective performance management systems. And again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, these systems are very complicated, and it's beyond the scope of this course to really go through each and every type of system and every single type of exam. As I mentioned before, that would entail a course in and of itself within the human resource major. This is an introductory course, so it would not be part of the syllabus. Again, discuss the 5 approaches to performance management, the specific techniques used in each approach, and the way these approaches compare with the criteria for effective performance management systems. Also, to choose the most effective approach to performance measurement for a given situation. And we further go on to the next. As you know, this is going to be a very long chapter. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the different sources of performance information, choose the most effective one, discuss the potential advantages of social performance management and electronic monitoring for performance management, tracking, distinguishing the types of rating errors and explain how to minimize each in a performance evaluation, and conduct an effective performance feedback session and identify the cause of a performance problem, which is the ultimate goal in any performance appraisal, to see where you're strong and where we could improve your skills. Now, just to explain the need for performance appraisal, many organizations don't do it. I know that I don't do it at work. To be honest with you, I am human resources by myself. So for me to do that for 20 or 30 or 40 people would basically take me out of circulation for about 2 months, and would just be impossible. It would be great if we could do it, but this is done. I've seen it done only in. I'm not saying it's only that way, but from my experience, I've seen it done in major organizations, like big corporations, such as the hospitals that I've worked at and the HMO that I worked at for a brief period of time. So let us not dilly-dally. Let's move on. Yes, somebody just clicked in. You have a question? Okay. Okay, no problem. All right. No problem. So you can mute and then chime in with any questions. So performance management is important because we want to know where the employee stands. And of course, the employee wants to know where they stand. You don't want to hire somebody day one, say, okay, hi, this is your desk, this is your computer, these are your credentials to log in. And then 6 months later say, things are not really working out. I'm going to have to let you go. And the first time you spoke to that person was 6 months ago when you hired them. And the last time you speak to them is when you're firing them. And there's nothing in between. Obviously, that would not be fair, and it shows a high level of ineptitude of leadership. Obviously, my example was very extreme, but in my example, if such an example would happen, I would rather fire the manager or force the business owner, if I could, to sell his business because he or she doesn't know what they're doing. So a performance management system has 3 parts: defining performance, basically measuring performance, and feeding back performance information, which is important. Performance management as the process through which managers ensure that employees' activities and outputs are congruent with the organizational goals. You want to have that congruence. Is very important. So first, a performance management system specifies which aspects of performance are relative to the organization through job analysis to see what exactly the job entails and make sure that that's always aligned with the goals of the organization. Second, if the measures those aspects of performance through performance appraisal, which is only one method for managing employee performance, is done. If done correctly, the organization will benefit because we'll be able to see the congruence between the employee's performance and see how they fit nicely within the organizational goals, and of course, performance feedback, so that we can understand whether or not the employee is doing well, where they're falling short, and to see whether or not they actually hit the goals. And of course, you have to tie rewards into performance. That's very important. It's very, very basic. Even Frederick Taylor, that was a part of the whole scientific management theory, he was very into making sure that employees that did well, produced a lot, got paid better. It's important that people, when they get appraised, know that if I do well in these appraisals, if I'm congruent with the goals and I'm doing the right thing and and I'm hitting all my markers and all that is expected of me, then I'm going to be recognized for it in some green or whatever color currency your currency is. The practice of performance management is a prevalent practice, but often not valued or used effectively. Many times it's just done for regulatory purposes, such as in hospitals. And of course, that's not really, it's not going to be effective if it's just done for the regulatory systems. If it needs to be done because employees have the right to know where they stand and if they're doing well or if they're doing poorly. So many managers don't consider yearly performance evaluation useful. Half of employees are surprised by their ratings and hurt. Many times these ratings seem arbitrary. Imagine if, we never had class. All we do is I just post stuff online, never answer your emails, just give you 2 or 3 things to do in class, and then that's your grade. And let's say some of you got a B or an A- or a C or anything lower than the A that everyone's going after, you'll be very upset, and rightfully so. You never had a chance to speak to me. You never had a chance to find out what it is that I'm looking for. I never gave you any indication of what is considered A work, B work, and give any samples of work. All the things that we do together in a classroom, which you would expect of a teacher, you should also expect that of an employer, to be able to give you valid feedback and real-time feedback, not just at the end of 12 months, not to tell you anything. If you're a boss and you see your employees straying from the path, you need to get them back on. We have to right the ship in order for the employee to succeed. The point is, when you hire someone, and this is something that eludes so many smart people, is that you want the employee to succeed. But in order to succeed, you have to give them the tools and help them succeed. Very few people are just like turnkey kind of employees. I remember I had this boss back in the city. He wasn't really very knowledgeable on anything to do with HR. He was upset because he wanted me and all of his employees to be just turn the key. You're self-managed, no direction. Basically, he was a lazy guy, and he just wanted to show up to work, collect a paycheck, fool around on the internet, leave 2 hours early, come in 2 hours late, and I'm going to depend on the team. Doesn't work that way. As a manager, sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and get down and dirty into the trenches and help your employees, coach your employees. But a lot of bosses don't know how to do that and don't want to do that. Okay, the next slide, figure 8.1. And if you actually turn this into a thingy doodad here, actually, at the end, I don't know how to get to it. It's like, there we are. At the end, it's because my screen is big. There's a little blue link. Figure 8.1 basically talks about the various steps of performance management process. Number 1 is define performance outcomes for company, division, and department, which is important. You have to know what the outcomes are. Develop employee goals, behavior, and actions to achieve outcomes. Provide support in ongoing performance discussions. Again, it's ongoing. Evaluate performance, identify the improvements needed, and provide consequences for performance results. In other words, you will achieve a certain goal, you'll achieve a certain level, you're going to get something for it. If you miss that level, you're going to be punished, sanctioned for it, or not promoted, or whatever the situation is. So again, step 1 is understand and identify important performance outcomes or results, align goals and behaviors to organization strategies and goals, which is very important. You want to make sure that this employee's behaviors and performance aligns with the goal. If it doesn't, then what's the purpose of it? I mean, it's just logic. Everyone in the organization should be working for one purpose: to advance the goals and the strategies of the organization so that it can be a viable business model and make money and help society, which is very important. If employees' jobs are not appraised in such a way to see whether or not it actually fits, excuse me, I should cough this way, it's a waste of time. Step number 2, understand the process or how to achieve the goals established in the first step. Identify measurable goals, behaviors, and activities that will help employees achieve the performance results. Make these part of the employees' job descriptions. So when they're hired, they actually know these are the things I'm responsible to do. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a job and I had no idea what was expected of me. I kind of had to wing it. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes I've had bosses. I had this one guy who hired me, didn't really have a description, hired me for one specific purpose, and because I did the job so well, I finished that part of the job within 6 weeks. And I didn't wait for him to tell me what to do. I kind of picked up other things around the organization that I thought needed doing. And instead of thanking me, he would be like, oh, I don't know, maybe you could find a part-time job. I only need you for 3 days. I'm like, I don't understand you. You hired me for full-time purposes. You don't know how to deploy me. I've deployed myself. I'm doing everything for you. Like, what's your problem? I mean, the guy was an absolute lunatic, unfortunately. I mean, this person, he was nuts. He was a very, very eccentric person. Again, let me just leave it at that because I don't want to badmouth anybody figure out what I'm talking about. But I'm using this just as an example. I'm using this for purpose here to teach you how not to be a boss. Basically, and again, I guess it was my inexperience on the job interview. I mean, if you're a good interviewer and you've been around the block, you will know if someone is hiring you and knows what they're hiring you for. If someone's wishy-washy, ask them, okay, what are my job duties and responsibilities? It's whatever I decide. You know you're in trouble. Because what does that mean? That means that they'll send you out for coffee, clean the toilet, take my kids to school, pick up my cleaners. I mean, you need to know what encompasses my job. And many times people get very nervous and say, well, what do you mean? Oh, it's only what I tell you, and if I ask you to do something else, you're not going to do it. So if you're dealing with a person like that, obviously they're not professionals, and you don't want to work in a place like that. You want to work in a place where you know what is expected of you. Of course, we know that if you have a job description, you're not going to be married to it word for word. There's always at the end of every good job description, Zoya, there's always a little link or a little the disclaimer, so to speak, that tells you that, hey, this is not the only thing that you're responsible for, or anything that the organization needs at the time. Now, obviously, that has parameters. I mean, I'm an office manager. If they tell me I need you to bathe patients in my clinic or clean them, I'm sorry. That's not even remotely. I'm not even trained to do that. And yes, you need to be trained to do that. All right, let's move on. I hope I answered your question. Step number 3: provide employees with training, necessary resources and tools, and frequent feedback. Training, invest in training. That may mean that you have to send them to a course or buy them books or whatever it entails, or send them to classes in college, whatever it entails. Focus on accomplishments as well as issues and challenges influencing performance. You want to give the good and the bad. You don't want to just harp on one thing. Okay, we move on to slide 10. The manager and employee, step 4, should discuss and compare the targeted performance goals and supporting behaviors with the actual results. In other words, the gap analysis. All the good things that you need to do to get 100 and where you're at and what the difference is and why you got there. So annual or biannual, twice a year, formal performance review. And don't wait to do it every couple of years. You don't want somebody to go past that long without having an appraisal, because otherwise it's not helpful. Step 5, identify what the employees can do to capitalize on performance strengths and address weaknesses. So you're basically having a PTA, but just your parents are just not showing up. Step 6, provide consequences for achieving or failing to achieve performance outcomes. So all of this, as far as performance management is concerned, has to have a strategic purpose. It's not just done because some HR guy is bored and he has nothing to do with his life and give the poor slob a job to do. No, there's a strategic purpose. So the performance management system should link employee activities with organizational goals. As this is what I said in the beginning. I have a job. I have 10 points in my job description. All of those lead to a goal. Now, it could be, obviously, it's going to be, some of them could be directly linked to the department, and some of them could be global. Again, you set it up as you see fit, but it has to ultimately impact, or it has to go in sync. It has to be married to the goals of the organization, because otherwise all you're doing is wasting valuable time and resources and killing a lot of trees to print the papers that you don't need to. You have to define the results, behaviors, and employee characteristics that are necessary for carrying out these strategies. And that's why I said, excuse me. Wow. Okay, I'm not touching anybody, so I'm not going near anybody, so I don't need to wash my hands now. I'll wash it afterwards. For all you people out there, I know we're in the middle of this crazy virus thing, but I just don't want to interrupt class. And I don't have Purell with me, but I will wash my hands, so don't get nervous. Develop measurement and feedback systems. Again, you're driving a car. I need to know if I'm out of gas. My gas gauge has to work. My battery gauge has to work. People deserve a feedback. They deserve to know. And I'll be honest with you. You guys get feedback from me very, very easily when I give you a grade. And you know, through the midterm, through the final, etc., etc. I also get feedback from you guys. Most of the time, thankfully, very good. And sometimes there are some points where people give me advice of how to improve that. That's valuable to me, because if I don't know what you guys want, then I can't make the next class better for someone else. And as an employee of the college, I can't do my job better unless I'm giving honest feedback. And if my honest feedback says I'm doing great and you're wonderful, X, Y, and Z, okay, I'm happy with it, but at least I know that what I'm doing is good. So then I will proceed to do what I'm doing and hopefully add better content to it. But again, that can't happen unless I have proper feedback. It also has an administrative purpose. Performance management information used for salary decisions, promotions, retention, or termination. In other words, did we keep you or did we let you go? Layoffs, when necessary, many times layoffs. As we have an employee, we're not going to fire him, but they're kind of like bottom 10%. And if there's a need for a layoff, they'll be the first ones let to go. And recognition of individual performance. Let's say there's an annual bonus or something. So I'm going to link, I should make a very, very strong link and a heavy linkage between performance appraisal and, of course, that recognition, financial promotion, corner office, I don't know, whatever the thing is that you're giving the person. But unfortunately, managers tend to be uncomfortable rating employees. And by the way, that's why when you rate me at the end of the semester, it's never by name. Because if you did it by name, you would be how many of you would rate your professor if you had your name on the sheet and he or she would know who said what? Would you be comfortable? Sorry, Zoe, repeat that again. You're kind of breaking in and out. You're like, okay, so you're a brave soul. Is anybody as brave as Zoya was? No. 100%. You're brave. You're the exception to the rule. Most people, and let me tell you something, I hate to say this, many managers, and I found myself in this situation, are uncomfortable in criticizing. And I don't mean, or even like pointing things out. And I could tell you, I've been managing for, let me see, I've been managing for 24 years, almost a quarter of a century. And I can tell you it's very difficult to give somebody a performance review because they'll get upset and they'll get very defensive, which is the natural tendency. But that's the way it goes. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. You need to be a big boy and a big girl and put on your big boy clothes or big girl clothes and do the job. And it's not easy. If it was easy, then everybody would be doing it, right? Okay, let's move on. Developmental purpose: improve the performance of employees, including deficiencies and the causes of deficiencies, helps good performance get training and opportunities, and it acts as a GPS system for improvement. Strategic congruence. Okay, if you look on the screen, many of the slides have a bit of a note in the bottom. This is actually the slides that are given to the instructors, so I would imagine they're more robust than the student ones. So I'm sharing these with you. So strategic congruence is the extent to which a performance management system elicits, takes out, or brings out job performance that is congruent with the organization's strategy, goals, and culture. So a good performance management system will elicit all those things in the behavior of the employee, in their, not just their behavior, the social behavior, but in how they act, how they do their job, to see whether or not it's aligned with the organization or not aligned. Remember, not every poor performer is a real poor performer. We're going to kind of touch on this at the end if we get there tonight. But many times it is easier for the employer, and if anybody's going to watch this on YouTube and you're an employer, please be honest with yourself and say, listen, I really don't know what I'm talking about. So instead of me just firing someone, let me seek counsel and find out, is this person failing because I am inept and I'm the one that should be going back to school? Maybe I'm the one that should be getting fired because I don't know what I'm talking about. Or is it that this employee is really deserving of being let go? Now, sometimes it's obvious that an employee has to go because they committed a crime, they committed fraud, they're totally inept. They're rude to the patients if you're in a clinical setting. They're rude to the customers, what have you. But many times it's a performance issue that causes you to want to fire someone. You really have to dig deep and be honest with yourself. Maybe it's because I'm lousy at training employees or my expectations are not real. I've seen people like this and they're mad. Honestly, I've said this many times. I hate to say this, but many of the people that you come in contact with suffer from some sort of psychological disorder, running from mild to heavy duty, take pills, and maybe go into the rubber room and be stuck in solitary confinement till they become normal. I have seen it all. I have seen people that are really mentally ill, very ill. And many times they'll say, you're not doing your job. I'm like, sure, I'm not doing my job, because you tell me to do 5 things, and 10 minutes later you call me to do another 5 things. You interrupt me, go do, and then not only have you interrupted me, but then you go back and blame me for not finishing the other 10 things you gave me in the morning. Well, how could I? You send me all over the place, either because you just don't know how to manage me, or because you're cheap and you don't have enough employees. So you want to take me, make yourself feel good. I know this sounds like a therapy session, but it's not. This is my experience. Make yourself feel good. I'm a well-paying employer. But how do you pay well? You pay well because you have one person do the job of 10 people. So you need to have realistic expectations. And this is really what goes back to what I said before a couple of weeks ago about job analysis. You really have to think about what is it that you want. Can you imagine being a waiter or waitress and you're waiting on somebody in a fancy restaurant and they have no idea what they want to order, and you suggest a couple of things? I don't know. You would just say, okay, listen, let me know. I'm going to walk to the next table and take the order. The same thing would be over here. I mean, you have employees, you're constantly firing them. You got to dig deep into your soul and say, hey, maybe I'm the one that needs to be fired or re-educated or retooled. Okay? Anybody want to comment on what I just said? Okay, we'll move on. Alrighty then. Performance measure criteria. You have to develop a model, use existing databases to develop measures, use statistical and qualitative tools. So you have statistical is quantitative and qualitative. The basic difference, and we cover this actually in Principles of Marketing, quantitative data is numbers, right? You have numbers of how many yeses, how many no's, looking at a survey, how many people chose blue, how many people chose black. And then there's qualitative, what I call the soft underbelly, which gives reason for the quantitative. So in terms of HR, I'm just using this as an example. You have, let's say, a turnover rate that's very high in an organization. A lot of people are leaving. That's very, very worrisome, but you need to have an answer for why they're leaving. Are they leaving for reasons that are because they're leaving their boss? Because many times, this is the way it works. You don't leave your job, you leave your boss. Is it because the pay is low? Is it just because that's the nature and the entire industry is like this? And what do you expect? Somebody flipping a burger is going to leave after a year, 2 years. They're not going to want to be professional burger flippers. They're going to move on with life. So you have to basically accept the fact that even if you pay them a little bit more, that most people are going to aspire to do more than that. And again, I'm not disparaging anybody that flips burgers for a living. It's an honest living. I'm just saying, but there are many people that feel that they could do other things. I'm not going to say the word better, because who am I to judge what's better and what's not? But people may get bored of the job, or just say, listen, I only took it because I'm a high school kid, or I'm in college and I want to earn a few bucks. That was never my aspiration. I don't want to get emails or texts, oh my gosh, you're anti-burger flipper. I don't need that. I'm just using that as an example. Revisit the model and revise, act on conclusions, which is very important. You have a conclusion, a statistical study, you look at your performance measurement tool, act on it, do something about it. Don't just throw it into somebody's file and let it collect dust. Audit to see if the desired result was achieved, and if it wasn't, see that if it was achieved, and look to see maybe after I gave this person a constructive review, I showed them where they fall short. Now I can help them, I can rehabilitate them to become better. Okay, the tool that you use has to be valid. So again, validity is the extent to which a performance measure assesses all the relevant and only the relevant aspects of performance. It's very, very important. Can't be deficient or contaminated. Meaning you can't build a system that forces you into one direction. It has to be open-ended. It has to be open to actually be valid, and consistency is very important. So if it is deficient, if it does not measure all aspects of performance, let's say there are 6 aspects that you deem to be important for performance. Let's say persistence. Let's talk about quality of work. Let's talk about your citizenship behaviors, etc., etc. And you feel like the employee is falling short. Well, maybe it's because they're only measuring them on 3 criteria when the job, and if you look at industry-wide, has 6 levels of criteria, or 7, or 8, or 9, or 10. Don't be cheap. If you feel you need more criteria, then add the criteria. Again, there is no one job that is measured the same exact way, right? It is contaminated if it evaluates irrelevant aspects of performance or aspects that are not job related, such as appearance. Okay, it is not job related. Obviously, if it's a model, you're going to be looking at appearance, or somebody that's modeling something, or somebody that's in fashion or something. They have to wear certain clothing. They can't just walk around. If they're many times, if you walk into stores, people are actually wearing the suits in the suit store that are sold. That's a part of the job. Or somebody wears a uniform for a job. Does the person wear the proper uniform? Okay, that's what the job is. Concerned with maximizing the overlap between actual job performance and the measure of job performance. Here you have figure 8.2. You can look at it yourself, shows the contamination and deficiency of a job performance measurement, and you could read the information, the narrative at the bottom of the slide. Okay, slide 19, reliability refers to the consistency, as I mentioned before, performance measure. Inter-rater reliability, you're going to see this word later on. Inter-rater reliability is the consistency among the individuals who evaluate the employee's performance. So everyone has to have a certain consistency, the judges, that is. And retest reliability should be reliable over time. So if it's kind of, let's use a blood pressure cuff as an example. If I'm taking a blood pressure, and it shouldn't be that if I took it once, it would be 140 over 90, and I took it the next time, it would be 200 over 86. And then the next time, it would be 120 over 75. That would show you that there's an issue with the blood pressure machine. So this should be reliable over time. It should show proper testing, not crazy spikes. Acceptability refers to whether the people who use performance measure accept it. So obviously, if it's not going to be accepted, it's just a formality, then what's the point? May take too much time or not be accepted as fair. 3 categories of fairness: procedural, it has to be fair on an interpersonal level, and the outcomes. So let's look at the next slide, which defines this. Procedural fairness implication gives managers and employees opportunity to participate in development of system, kind of like management by objective. Ensure consistent standards when evaluating different employees. Minimize rating errors and biases. To the extent that you can, you want to eliminate as much bias as possible. And there's always going to be bias. It's like there's always going to be that teacher's pet. There's always going to be that employee that the boss likes more than someone else. It's very hard to shed that. That's just the way it is. Interpersonal fairness. Give timely and complete feedback. For those of you taking my online courses, I do my best to give you some form of feedback. If you get anything less than a perfect score, I try to tell you where you fell short. Allow employees to challenge the evaluation. You have to have some sort of way of doing that, and provide feedback in an atmosphere of respect and courtesy. Outcome fairness. Communicate expectations regarding performance evaluations and standards. You have to tell people what is expected of them. Can't fault them if you don't tell them. Can't tell someone, this happened to me when I worked for the city. My boss had it in for me. He said, okay, you have to be in charge of sending people for training. Never told me that there is a budget. Assumed that I knew that there was a budget. I thought I just, if somebody comes, I'm just booking it. Didn't tell me I'm responsible for any budget. I had no idea. Second of all, he didn't even tell me what the budget was. And then when I was close to spending it, he's like, oh, well, you almost overspent the budget. What's going on? Hello, tell me what the budget is. Tell me that there is a budget. But obviously, we're talking about someone who didn't know what he was doing. Outcome fairness, communicate expectations regarding performance evaluation standards, and communicate expectations regarding awards. So if I want to know when I'm going to get promoted, I have to know. There's a scale. There's a scoring system that tells me that if I'm going to get to a certain level, I'm going to get promoted, or God forbid, if a person is below that level, they'll get demoted or put on probation or terminated if they don't improve in a certain amount of time. Any questions thus far? Everyone good so far? Makes sense? Okay. Specificity. Ooh, that's a funny word. Specificity is the extent to which a performance measure tells employees what is expected of them and how they can meet these expectations. In other words, don't give me these pie in the sky, unrelated things that measure me on nothing. Right? Don't give me one of these, because I'm not an HR professional, so I'm just going to go to Wikipedia. Again, I'm not putting Wikipedia down, or some other website that has a boiler template that's non-specific to this job, And the purpose of that template is just to give you an idea of how to do a job evaluation, a performance evaluation. And you just take that, and it has nothing to do with that. You don't tweak it. You don't personalize it. Of course, that's not very, very smart. So it has to be relevant to both strategic development purposes, must measure what an employee must do to achieve company goals, must point out employees' performance problems. It's only fair. Approaches continued simple ranking. Requires managers to rank employees within their departments from highest performer to poorest performer or best performer. So I'm ranking you against the best and the worst. All right. Alternation ranking, by contrast, consists of the manager looking at a list of employees, deciding who's the best employee and crossing the person's name off the list until we get to the bad employees, so to speak. So again, simple ranking, highest performer to poorest. Alternation ranking, cross one name off the list at a time. This is the best. The truth is, at the end of the day, they both accomplish the same thing. They're just derivatives of one within the other. Forced distribution method also uses a ranking format, but employees are ranked in groups. Employees ranked in predetermined categories, helps managers tailor development activities to employees based on their performance. Ethical if the system is clearly communicated. The system is part of a positive dimension of the organization's culture, and the employees have the chance to appeal decisions, which is kind of the same for the other ones, but it's more group as opposed to the individual. Table 8.3, slide number 25, talks about performance and development based on force distribution, gives you ranking or distribution category, for example, A, above average, exceptional, or A1 performer, and then it tells you performance and development plan. For A, let's say it's accelerate development through challenging job assignments. Then the next one is provide mentor from leadership team to help them, etc., etc. And then you go through each of the things, B and C, talk about average, a lower level, meets expectations, steady performer, and C, below expectation, poor performance, with all the necessary performance and development plan attributes. You could see it for yourself. That is on slide 25, table 8.3. Okay, we move on. The paired comparison method requires managers to compare every employee with every other employee in the work group. Again, giving an employee a score of 1 every time he or she is considered the high performer, kind of a derivative of something we mentioned before. In a way, it's kind of like, and I know everyone would hate this, in a classroom, take the best paper, that's an A. Anything less than that is not an A. And people can say it's not fair. Why did you pick that person as the A? You didn't pick mine as the A. None of you are challenging me on this because I think you all agree with me, right? Yes, no, maybe? Anybody want to chime in on what I said? Okay. I guess it's a unanimous yes. All right. Slide number 27. Okay. Approaches to measuring performance. Evaluating the comparative approach virtually eliminates problems of leniency, central tendency, and strictness. Problem often not linked to strategic goals. Validity and reliability depend on the raters themselves, who may not have their act together, may not be professionals at it. Individuals are completely unaware of what they must do differently to improve their ranking, which is very bad. Many times I'll have a student ask me, Professor, I got a certain grade. What can I do to get a better grade? So sometimes I'll have input, and sometimes I'll say, listen, a 20 is a perfect score and you got a 19. It's kind of hard for me to tell you what to do to get one better point. I'll give feedback when somebody does poorly or mediocre and they've been doing great work till then I can give them feedback. But in any case, you have to give them feedback that's constructive and it'll help them improve their ranking significantly, not just on a minute level. Employees and managers are less likely to accept evaluations. Okay, moving on. Approaches to measure performance continued. Graphic rating scales evaluate a list of traits on a 5-point scale. It can be discrete or a continuous scale. If you want to look at the differences between these scales, I gave you a little note over here on page 339. Please go to the book and it is clearly defined there. Again, the purpose of these lectures is not to spoon feed every single definition. It's just to give you an overview of the chapter. And of course, it is incumbent on the student to read the work on their own. And I just put it here at the bottom that the actual differences are outlined over there. Moving along to slide number 29. Mixed standard scales were developed to get around some of the problems of graphic rating scales. In a mixed standard scale, define the relevant performance dimensions and then develop statements representing good, average, and poor. This is kind of similar to what you have when you rate me as a professor, right? You have kind of, well, agree. You have it differently. You have agree, strongly disagree, things of that nature. But it's very similar to this. But these help because it kind of helps you know where you're really, really good, where you're average, and where you're very deficient. It helps you. The purpose is you can zone in on an attribute and see, wow, I'm really deficient in this one thing. First of all, it makes you feel better as an employee. If all you're deficient in is one or two areas, you don't look at yourself as a complete washout. You don't say to yourself, oh my God, I'm so bad. I can't believe I did that. You're able to actually see where you need to improve. And these statements are then mixed with the statements from other dimensions on the actual rating instrument, and of course, give you a total picture. I'm very for that type of thing. The attribute approach continued. Evaluating the attribute approach, easy to develop and generalize. Problems, usually a little congruence between the techniques and the company's strategy. I disagree. I think that's the result of poor design. I think that if you design it well and you have the proper attributes, it has to be congruent with the organization's strategy. I don't see why that's the case. Usually have a vague performance standards that are open to different interpretations by different raters. Again, that depends on your team. That's always going to. And the next one is behaviorally anchored rating scale. If you look at pages 342 to 343, they'll go through all the aspects of it. So this bar system can increase inter-rater reliability, which we spoke about what inter-rater is in the beginning of the chapter, and can have bias information recall, which is dangerous. You don't have any bias coming back and shading, and coloring the way you look at things. Then there's another one, the BOS, which is supposed to be a more, from what I read in the book, again, you can look at it more on page 344, I gave you a marker, is a more robust. It has more wide-ranging features, more attributes, it gives you a better, fuller picture. Again, look at page 344 for the actual information. Competencies, just to tell you, such as skills, knowledge, abilities, and personal characteristics that enable employees to successfully perform their jobs. A competency model identifies and provides descriptions of competencies that are common for an entire occupation, organization, job family, or a specific job. It's useful for a variety of HR practices, including recruiting, selection, training, and development. It's very important to look at competencies. When I worked in hospitals, that's all that Joint Commission wanted to look at. Where are your competencies? Where are your ratings and competencies for the nurses, for the respiratory techs, for the doctors, etc., etc. Can be used to help identify the best employees to fill open positions, and can be used as the foundation for development plans that allow the employee and the manager to target specific strengths and development areas. Must be up to date, drive business performance, be job related, be relevant for all of the company's business units, and provide sufficient detail to make an accurate assessment of employees' performance. The behavioral approach, evaluation of the behavioral approach can link the company's strategy to specific behavior necessary for implementing that strategy. I think that's a good thing. You want to see that linkage, provide specific guidelines, guidance, and feedback for employees about the performance expected of them. Acceptability and reliability are high. Weaknesses, behaviors and measures must be continually monitored and revised. I don't see why that's a weakness. I think that's a given. Assumes that there is the one best way to do the job, and the behaviors that constitute this best way